Morning, Ali.
Good morning, everyone. Lovely to see you. I'm going to give a bit of a health warning that I'm not sure this is a sermon. It's probably more a talk and a series of observations I've made. I've seen a few of you get your pencils out. So there are 3 points. But as I say, I'm not sure it's a sermon as such. But we're delighted to be able to be asked this morning to speak on this subject. So one of my favourite musicals is Fiddler on the Roof. You don't see it very much on telly now, but when I was little, it was on most Christmases or between Christmas and New Year, and sometimes at Easter as well. But we would always stop as a family and watch it together. And I think it's about 3 hours long, so it's a bit of a marathon. But my family and I, we knew all the songs, we sang along. Occasionally, my dad would join in with the dancing, which was quite startling. But if you don't know it, the film is a musical about life in a small Jewish community in pre-revolutionary Russia. And life is really, really hard. And the key character is a milkman called Tevier. And he's got 5 daughters. And his role in life is to try and find these 5 daughters good husbands. And he spends a lot of time with the village matchmaker. And he also spends a lot of time talking to God. About the daughters, but what's going on in the world. But he has a wonderful relationship with God. The other person that features quite a lot in the village is the rabbi, who's, other than the matchmaker, I think is probably the key person in the village. And the rabbi was consulted on all sorts of things. So, for example, why has my cow stopped milking? The question about the 5 husbands for the 5 daughters was quite a frequent one. But my favourite one was when they asked the Rabbi, is there a prayer for the Tsar? And given what was going on in Russia at the time and how badly people were treated, the Rabbi did pause a bit. And then he says, stroking his very long, luxuriant beard, yes, may God bless and keep the Tsar far away from us. So wonderful, wonderful images from that film. And that insight into the role of the rabbi really reminded me of when you read about the Luke version of giving the Lord's Prayer, which you find in Luke chapter 11, verses 1-4. One day Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he finished, one of his disciples said to him, Lord, teach us to pray, just as John has taught his disciples. It wasn't unusual in the time that each rabbi had their own way of praying, maybe a set of prayers or a particular routine they used. So by asking Jesus, as their rabbi to teach them prayer wasn't an unusual thing. But what then followed was different. As we read in our reading, those approaches to prayer, some of them could be quite sort of, extrovert and not that focused on God. So whilst the Lord Prayer tells us what to pray, I'm going to focus this talk a little bit beyond that, really focusing on praying as Jesus taught. Our Bible reading this morning from Matthew comes from the collection of chapters 5-7 in Matthew, which is also known as the Sermon on the Mount. And it's a really, really important part for teaching for disciples. You'll find the Beatitudes there, and that's the place where Jesus updates the 10 Commandments, if you like, and adds to them. And if you get a chance later on today or later on this week, just to read through that sermon in total, there's some really, really important insights for us and teaching for us just captured in those 2 chapters. When preparing this talk, I turned to the Message for a more everyday translation of the same piece. So from the Message, it's a little bit more stark. Be especially careful when you're trying to be good so that you don't make a performance out of it. It might be good theatre, but God who made you won't be applauding. Pray with simplicity. When you come before God, don't turn that into a theatrical production either. All these people make a regular show out of their prayers, hoping for 15 minutes of fame, Do you think God's got a box seat? Here's what I want you to do. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Just be there as simply and as honestly as you can manage. The focus will shift from you to God, and you will sense his grace. There's several of us that are taking part in the prayer course at the moment, run by Jo and Ruth, or the big read that Polly's organising around Pete Gregg's book, How to Pray. I'm learning a lot. I haven't finished the book or the course yet, so there might have to be part 2 of this talk, you never know. But I am learning a lot about how to pray. Just knowing the Lord's Prayer really isn't enough. It's been useful to be challenged about how I pray, so I now recognise that prayer is much more than the shopping list or "Dear God, help" approach, which I've mostly taken to date. And of course, there is room for praying for others and "Dear God, help" prayers as well. Based on Matthew 6 verses 5, these are some of the top tips I found useful so far. Find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Many times in the Bible, we read that Jesus went to a secluded place to pray, by a lake, up a mountain, and just before he was arrested, he was praying in the Garden of Gethsemane. For several years, my secluded place was my car, as I drove between an hour and 15 minutes to and from work in Wokingham, and later 2.5 hours each way to and from Birmingham. I could pray, with my eyes open, obviously, sing worship songs, listen to Christian radio, all without being interrupted. Even travelling into London by train was provided a good time to pray and read daily Bible notes. Not so great for singing, though. There's a beautiful story about Susanna Wesley, Charles and John Wesley's mum. She had 8 other children and very little space. And when she prayed, she pulled her apron over her head. And her children knew that she was praying, that was her quiet time, and she was not to be disturbed. So tip 1, find a quiet, secluded place so you won't be tempted to role play before God. Tip 2, just be there as simply and as honestly as you can manage. And I've lifted that from the Message. In the NIV version that Marjorie read to us, when you pray, do not keep babbling like pagans, for they think they will be heard because of their many words. A few weeks ago, one of the points from the sermon, and I believe it was Ken, but apologies if I've got that wrong, keep it simple, keep it real, keep it up. If we bear this advice in mind, then we come before God honestly. And if we're struggling for the right words, Romans 8:26 tells us, we do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit intercedes for us through wordless groans. So let's keep it simple, keep it real, and keep it up. And then point 3, and this is the big one, prayer's not about us, it's about God. I put exclamation marks after that because, it should be obvious, but as I reflect, it hasn't been that obvious really in my approach to prayer. One of the children's songs that we sing is, "Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God. Our God is a great big God, and he holds us in his hands." And as irritating as that song is when sung, it's much needed reminder that sometimes we make God into something very small that we try to manage, and we don't acknowledge his full splendour and glory. Although I've worked shift in a non-conformist way since the age of 11, my mum is an Anglican, and I went to church with her most Sundays between the ages of 7 and 10. At her church, you were given a hymn book and a thin red book which held the details of the service for the day. There was always a psalm to start, an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, a number of hymns, a set reading for the day, the collect, and then a set of prayers and responses that we said every week. I found it unbelievably boring that we said the same prayers each week. I could recite them all in my sleep, but I never really thought very deeply about the words that we were using. I now realise that by following the Red Book, it helped us as a congregation to cover a much broader remit of prayer. So the focus was mostly on God and not on us. Worship and adoration, not just singing, but psalms and praises to God as well. Psalms are great. They cover just about everything, even if you just want something to say in the morning and something in the evening. Some of them are a bit scary, we know from the series we did a little while ago. Prayers for forgiveness for our sins, confession or supplication. Prayers for others, intercession. Prayers for those in leadership and authority, which at the moment I'm finding very challenging. But 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1-3 tells us that we need to pray for those people that make those huge decisions that impact not just our lives, but people's lives around the world. Prayers for ourselves, petition. Readings from the Old and New Testament as a reminder of God's love and promises, all he's done for us and all he has planned for us. And a blessing for the day or the week, but also to act as a reminder of the many blessings God has already given us and the many more he has in store. And you will then find that the focus will shift from you to God, and you will begin to sense his grace. But it's an awful lot to cover. Throughout the New Testament, you'll often see that Jesus rose early to pray, and several of David's psalms relate to specific times of the day, morning or evening mostly. So in addition to finding a secluded place, Jesus has also had a dedicated quiet time, if you like, although it's very clear that he prayed throughout the day. I was almost in constant communication with God. He prayed before taking action. He prayed to seek guidance. And if you think Jesus is asking guidance of our Father, then how much more should we be asking? God is interested in the small things in our lives. He wants us to talk to him. I want to spend more time with God and move beyond the shopping list approach. I want to learn to be still and listen. Psalm 37, verse 7. The best way for me to do that is to take on board the teachings of Jesus, both in words and in action. I'm still learning to prioritise more time with God and having a quiet time again, but I yearn to do this more. I'm not currently working, so I'm using this time to develop and strengthen my prayer habits. It's no coincidence that this is a season when I have far fewer distractions and responsibilities, so therefore it's easier for me to make choices about how I spend my time. I would encourage each of you to look at your prayer life through the lens of that Jesus gave us, not just knowing the Lord's Prayer, but knowing how to pray to him. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, thank you that you taught your disciples to pray. Amen.